In this video, I'll be going over 5 tips to speed up your mechanics in R6. Without wasting any more of your time, tip 1 is to increase your speed by increasing your accuracy first. Now, practicing your accuracy more will increase the speed at which you are accurate, and therefore increase your mechanical speed. Everybody wants to be a mechanical god, but unless you're actually hitting your shots, the speed of which you're hitting your shots won't matter. And practicing your accuracy more and more and more will increase the chances that you're able to hit your shots more, which will increase the speed at which you're able to do so because you're confident in the fact that you'll be able to hit that shot. When you're watching somebody like Bolo or like Spoit, they're not hitting targets super fast because they're just fast-minded and they have fast mechanics. They're doing it because they know they're accurate, and they've been accurate, and they've been drilling their accuracy on the same sensitivity for years. So they've been able to speed it up more and more and more through a process of overtime training because they've gotten down the accuracy part first. A lot of people think that accuracy and speed are two different things, but in this case, they're actually in the same vein. The more accurate you are, the more fast your mechanics will seem to be because you're just snapping to people instead of slowly aiming at people because you're inaccurate. Not only this, but the more mistakes you make because of inaccuracy, the slower you will be overall because you have to spend time readjusting for your mistakes. To teach you this, I'm going to go over something called micro adjusting. So when people flick, they don't just flick immediately to their target like I just did there coincidentally. What most people do when they flick is they flick to the general area of the target, right? So they'll flick near the circle and then they'll micro adjust to where the circle actually is. This is where things like grid shot and aim labs come in because it teaches you micro adjusting very well. That way when you do flick, you micro adjust back to the target very, very quickly. So flicking is actually two different parts. You're not just speedily flicking to one part of the target, you're flicking and then micro readjusting to where you're actually flicking to. It's a very fast thing, and the reason that some people seemingly can just flick to targets is because they've gotten so fast at flicking and then micro adjusting to where their target actually is that you don't even see it unless you slow down their game footage. And like I was saying, the more mistakes that you end up making, the more you're going to have to make up for your mistakes. So if I flick way over here when I'm trying to hit this ball, it's going to take me way more time to micro adjust all the way back over to this ball than if I were to flick kind of next to the ball right here and then have to micro adjust over there. So the more mistakes that you're making in your aim, the slower your aim is going to feel because you're having to take more time to adjust for your mistakes. And this doesn't just go for mechanics. It goes for things like positioning. It goes for things like tracking. It goes for things like map knowledge. It goes for all kinds of avenues in the game. But I'll stick to mechanics for just now because that's what we're talking about. The less mistakes overall that you make, the less time you have to spend fixing your mistakes, which means that you'll end up just having faster mechanics. That's just how the game works, and that's how every game works for that matter. The second tip that I'm going to give you to increase the speed of your mechanics is finding the correct sensitivity. Now, this is a long tip because a lot of people make a lot of mistakes when finding the correct sensitivity. So one thing that I want to go over is having a faster sensitivity doesn't actually equate to having faster mechanics, because the only way to get faster mechanics is by getting good mechanics like we established earlier. If someone with a very, very fast sensitivity has to micro adjust a lot to get back to their target or is flat out just not hitting shots, they're going to have not fast mechanics as opposed to somebody with a really slow sensitivity who's able to hit all of his shots. A lot of people don't know this, but a lot of pro league players have very low sensitivities, but they're still seemingly able to flick to people like they have very fast sensitivities because they've just mastered their sensitivity. Not only this, but choosing whatever sensitivity is comfortable for you the most and then using and practicing on that will get you to that comfortable sensitivity. So you might actually want a really, really high sensitivity, but only if that's what you're comfortable with. If you load into the game for the first time and you notice that 70 sensitivity works out a lot better for you than, let's say, 6 sensitivity, then you should just run 70 sensitivity, which brings me into my next point. You don't want to copy other people's sensitivity. The reason that people that are good at their sensitivity are good isn't because they found some magical sensitivity that's just going to work for them and you. It's because they found a sensitivity that they specifically are good at, and then they practice and drilled that sensitivity over and over and over and over in game a lot. And you need to do the exact same thing. Like I said, if you load in and you find a sensitivity that works for you the most compared to other sensitivities, you need to drill that. It doesn't necessarily need to be a sensitivity where you're hitting every single shot immediately, but it needs to be around the best compared to all of the other sensitivities. Not only should you not copy sensitivities from from other people, but you shouldn't constantly be changing your sensitivities even if you're not copying it from other people. You don't want to be sensitivity hopping. Stick to one sensitivity, even if you aren't good at the moment with that sensitivity, like I just said earlier, because sticking to that sensitivity will make you good. Constantly changing sensitivities will make you inconsistent because you're not giving your brain the amount of time to adjust mentally to the sensitivity that you've just given it. You're also not giving yourself enough time to practice on that sensitivity to see how good you really could get with that sensitivity and the potential you have on that sensitivity specifically. Now, there is one caveat to this. You can change your sensitivity if you're starting to now aim really good and you've been practicing on a sensitivity, but you realize that a different sensitivity might do you better. Let's say you've been on a slow sensitivity for a while and you do pretty well, but you feel like you've kind of plateaued in your aim as much as possible. Then refresh yourself. Try something new. Try maybe a faster sensitivity. Try something maybe even lower, a mid sensitivity, whatever it may be. You can float around a little, but you only really want to be doing that after you've been drilling one sensitivity for months at the minimum to see how good you really can get at the sensitivity, and you only want to change it if you notice that you're plateauing. Now, the thing about changing sensitivities and trying to get better at mechanics is it can be hard mentally, which brings me into my third point. You need to keep yourself grounded. Now, if you're messing up, you're really not as bad as you think you are. I mess up a ton, and I'm a champion player. Bolo doesn't hit every shot. Spoit doesn't hit every shot. Pro players don't hit every shot. Hell, I know that there's people watching this video right now that have better mechanics than me, that have better mechanics than Pro League players. Hell, I even have better mechanics than some Pro League players. But that's not why they're in Pro League, because of their mechanics. They're a good player overall, and they're better than me, and they're better than you, which is why you shouldn't harp on yourself so much if you're having a bad day, or if you're not getting your sensitivity down immediately, because you're actually a lot better of a player than you think you are, and you actually have the potential to be an even better player than you think you do. Now, there's two sides to this coin. If you think you're good, you'll stop practicing and get worse. So you really shouldn't start to think that you're that good of a player either. You don't want to have an ego, but you also don't want to have your mind in the gutter. If you have a mindset of I'm a really good player, then you won't think you're bad, and you won't give yourself the actual reason you're doing bad, because instead of blaming the actual problem at hand or finding a problem that you may have, you're just not improving because you already think you're as good as you can be. Not only this, but again, going back to the side of not thinking you're good enough, if you're constantly getting down on yourself and thinking you're not good enough, you're not actually finding the problem at which you're not good enough for. You're just blaming yourself and not fixing the issue entirely. There's no point in having an ego, and there's no point in harping on yourself, because at the end of the day, those two things don't get the rounds won, and they don't win, and they don't get the games won. If you want to win more games though, you need to fix your common mistakes in your fights, which brings me to my fourth tip. Do you get headshotted often in fights? It might be because you're crouching into headshots or you're walking into pre-fires. Do you keep getting shot by people you aren't even looking at, like getting third-partied or shot from behind you? Then you probably need to fix your positioning or your game sense. Do people seem to see you before you see them, or have way more of a reaction time than you in gunfights? Then you're not holding angles correctly, or you're not peeking angles correctly, or you're not swinging angles correct. Do you keep dying to angles and holes you never even knew existed? Then you need to learn map knowledge and positioning better. There's tons of things that can actually get you better at the game than there is mechanics. So before you click on this video thinking that you need faster mechanics in order to get better or get out of the rank that you're in, notice that it's not just mechanics. A lot of people fall in this trap of I'm not getting where I am because I don't have the aim of somebody else. That's not true. Like I said, there are people in Pro League that have worse aim than me, or even probably you watching this video, but they're there because they master the fundamentals of other parts of the game so well that they were picked up because of their decision making, or because of their positioning, or because they just get the bomb down more in the game, or because they just win more rounds no matter their aim. So before you click on this video trying to get better aim, maybe focus on other avenues of the game instead of just blaming mechanics like most players do. There's also even more. The levers go deeper. Do you find that you're last alive a lot because your teammates are dying early? Well, instead of blaming your teammates, you might just need to match your team's aggression. If your teammates are roaming super heavily, it's good to have a person on site, but if you're last alive, they could use you as a support to help them off the site. If your team is rushing really heavily and you're the only one going utility, it's cool to get that utility, but if you're playing Thermite and you don't have a Thatcher, that Thermite is going to complete waste. So it would actually be more helpful if you would help your team rush than it would be to just be using utility and blaming blaming your team for running into the building and dying. You want to be playing with your team more often. Are you noticing that you're not able to clutch situations like 1v4s, 2v4s, 1vx's, whatever it may be? Well, it's because you don't know how to manage your aggression properly. There's so many different things that I can think of why you're doing certain things wrong, and there's so many things that you can fix than just your mechanics, because chances are you don't need to improve your mechanics. You need to improve in other avenues. Speaking of improving in other avenues, this brings me into my fifth and final tip. You need to not just practice what you're good at. The majority of people, and this doesn't even just go for Siege or video games in general, the majority of people only practice things that they're good at, or at least above average at, because it makes them feel better about themselves and it makes them feel like they're a better player than they actually are. The skill you're trying to get by clicking on this video and the rank you're trying to get is only attainable in the places that you aren't practicing. If you're really good at something and you keep drilling that over and over and over, you won't get into a higher rank. It's just not going to happen because you have other fundamentals that you're lacking. I'd rather have a player on my team that is a 6 out of 10 on the 3 things than a 10 out of 10 mechanical god, but a 4 out of 10 in everything else, because that player isn't reliable or consistent in the fact that they're going to be helping my team win round. Sure, they can drop a 15 bomb on one map, but the other 3 maps, they're dropping 3 kills with 5 deaths because mechanics aren't the only thing that can get you kills. So you need to practice what you're bad at. This goes for mechanics even in general, because there's multiple parts to mechanics. If you're really good at flicking, but you're terrible at tracking, or you're terrible at crosshair readjustment, but you're really good at tracking, then you need to drill other things. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're really terrible at tracking or crosshair readjustment, but you're great at flicking. You need to stop drilling flicking to make yourself feel better, like most other players. You need to practice what you're bad at, so you, in this case, need to practice your tracking or your crosshair readjustment, so you can get better at more than just one thing. There's a saying that a jack of all trades is a master of none, and most people assume that this means that a jack of all trades is not as good as someone who's really good at one thing. But did you know that that's not the complete saying? The complete saying is a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. I mean, you heard it here first. A jack of all trades, someone who is better at multiple things, even if they're not as good as somebody who's a master at one thing, is way better than someone who's a master at one thing. So make sure you're drilling things that you're terrible at much more than drilling things that you kind of already have the grasp of. And just as a bonus tip, you need to make sure that you're not overdoing mechanics because you feel like it. This is something I see a lot of Warden players or Plat players or Champ players doing a lot that I just wanted to talk about really quickly before the video ends. I see so many people who run in and do unnecessary movements. They'll sit and quick peek 30 times on one doorway. They'll sit and pre-fire and jiggle peek because they want to seem or feel like Bolo and they're off of 30 G fuels, and then they end up getting fried literally immediately after. Like, what was all of that movement for? It's better to play slow and correctly than it is to play fast and incorrectly and start making mistakes. It's called having patience, and it's something that you'd be surprised that a lot of players don't have. I even don't have it a lot in stream. Link down in the description, by the way. So don't play faster just for the sake of playing faster because you want to feel or look like somebody that you're not. I understand the goal of this video, again, is to get you faster at having better mechanics. But if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, then you might as well not try to get faster mechanics at all. Start off slow and accurate. Then you can worry about speeding up your mechanics later, because chances are if you're speeding up your mechanics, it's because you think you don't have good mechanics. And if you think you don't have good mechanics, trust me, it's not because of the speed of your mechanics. In other games, some pro coaches and YouTubers call this the Miyagi technique, which is unironically like a very accurate way of describing what this is, because it's good for you to drop your ego, learn things slow and correct, and actually learn the fundamentals and basics as best as you can. Then you can do them fast and start to speed things up once you've learned and mastered the basics. But that's pretty much it for today's video. My name's Alka. Check out this next video and I'll see you there. Later.